How important a role is diet in the development, progression and prevention of cancer?
Diet's very important in the development of cancer, once you've had cancer, and how to help you recover from cancer treatment. Very clever organisations like CRUK or the WHO have predicted that about 42% of cancers are lifestyle related, and within that about 40% are caused by obesity, which is largely a diet related issue. Our own research and other bodies have pointed out that you can split diet into sort of two ways: things which cause cancer and things which prevent cancer. And I feel the percentage is a lot higher. And I think, as time passes and awareness is increased, we'll discover that.
What percentage of cancers are attributable to exposure to carcinogens?
How many cancers are attributed to carcinogens? It's a difficult estimate because you have to look at lots of different data and whether the patient exercises, whether they're overweight. The World Health Organization have recently estimated it's somewhere between 9 and 30% of cancers are caused by carcinogens, but that percentage doesn't take into account anti-cancer diets at the same time. So we need more information, but the short answer is quite a few.
Can you please tell us about the most common dietary carcinogens?
Carcinogens come from many sources. Diet's number one probably, but of course there's cigarette smoking, there's natural infections which can cause cancer, like the wart virus, can come from too much sunlight, cosmic radiation, etc. But coming back to diet, the three most common sources are acrylamides, which come from superheated carbohydrates, and the carcinogens you are commonly found in meat, which would be the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and heterocyclic amines, and a group called the nitroso compounds. And these are caused by basically cooking meat.
Can heme iron in animal tissue cause cancer?
Whether heme is not a carcinogen on its own, but what it does is facilitate the conversion of nitrates, which you get naturally in vegetables, which aren't carcinogenic, by the way, but you get them added to meat, and when meat is cooked, the nitrates become carcinogenic. But that process of becoming carcinogenic actually requires a heme molecule, which you get in red meat, and that's why most of the data that meat is carcinogenic comes from red processed meat, or red meat, or white meat, which has had nitrates added to it. So yes, it is a factor. The heme iron is part of hemoglobin, which has got a protein and an iron molecule, and that is needed for nitrates to be converted to nitrosamines, which is the actual carcinogen. So that's why red meat is more carcinogenic than white meat or fish. So nitrates are in food naturally. They're in vegetables. And they're very healthy. They're converted to nitrous oxide, which reduces our blood pressure, improves sport performance, so they're needed when you exercise. But when you have vegetables, you don't tend to heat them that hot. They also contain natural polyphenols, which are the antidote to carcinogens. But in meat, especially red meat, there's a heme iron, which is a protein and an iron molecule, and that actually facilitates the conversion of nitrates to nitrosamines, and it's the nitrosamine is the final carcinogen. That's the thing which causes damage to the DNA, promotes inflammation, damages the immunity. So that's why the data for does meat cause cancer is primarily red meat actually, or processed meat, which has nitrates added as a preservative.
How can avoiding food-based carcinogens after a cancer diagnosis be beneficial?
Well, patients often say, Doc, I've got cancer now. Do I need to worry about my diet? Well, yes, you do, because the process of an early cancer spreading throughout the body, becoming more aggressive, is influenced very strongly by the way you live your lifestyle and the environment. So it's influenced by the number of carcinogens they eat, which can cause further genetic breaks and make the cancer more aggressive. Don't forget, carcinogens can actually promote chronic inflammation, and inflammatory markers actually are chemicals which actually, for some quirk of nature, cause cancer cells to grow faster, cause them to spread from the site of origin, spread to distant parts of the body. And, that's the thing which is fatal. The other component of diet is, of course, is having foods with lots of polyphenols and phytochemicals, which are the things in nature which give food its smell, its color, and its taste, and have enormous health benefits. So, there's not only my personal opinion that it's really important that patients with cancer change their diet. There's lots of studies showing that patients who have changed their diet and eat, more tea, spices, herbs, plant-based proteins, in other words, polyphenol-rich foods, have a lower risk of progression and relapse.
Can you tell us about the RERF epidemiologic cancer study?
The RERF study was a large cohort of patients who were exposed to ionizing radiation in Hiroshima and Nagasaki from the nuclear bombs. So these patients have an acquired genetic risk of cancer. So there are people in society who have an inherited genetic risk, such as the BRCA gene, the Angelina Jolie type gene. But that group is hundreds of thousands who have an increased risk of cancer. So within that group, they've asked questionnaires to say, do you exercise, do you smoke, do you eat vegetables, etc. And what's fascinating is there was a very significant difference in the people who developed cancer because of their exposure to radiation, changed by their lifestyle. So it shows that even if you have an increased risk of cancer, you can reduce your odds substantially by the foods you eat. And that's a good lesson, for all of us, really.
Can you tell us about your research on foods that are good for reducing the risk of cancer?
So what they found in the study, that obviously, patients who didn't smoke and they exercised and weren't overweight was very beneficial. But they also showed that if you ate foods with, they're called polyphenols, which is part of the phytochemical group, the natural chemicals which occur in nature, which give food its color, its taste, and its smell. And these foods reduce chronic inflammation, they improve the immunity, but actually they protect the DNA, they protect it from the carcinogens you eat. And in the study where patients were exposed to radiation, they'd already had their carcinogens. So the effect on their DNA protected them from cancer for years and years later. And there was a very significant difference between the groups who ate those foods and who didn't.
Do fish, chicken, eggs and dairy also develop carcinogens?
Well, heterocyclic amines is one of the carcinogens you find in meat. You can get it in cured fish. In fact, there's quite a lot of carcinogens in cured fish, actually. And heterocyclic amines can be found in lots of foods. You can get them in small quantities in eggs and dairy, but there are significantly less quantities than meat.
What components of a plant-based diet are anti-cancer?
Well, any food which is from nature, really, which is colourful, grown well, it's got a good smell, good taste. They're rich in phytochemicals, and there's over 180 different types of phytochemicals. The largest group are called polyphenols, and these are the group which are directly anti-cancer. So they have an antioxidant effect. So when a carcinogen is absorbed and a free radical is formed, these are the nasty little chemicals which damage the DNA. It can help mop up those free radicals before they damage the DNA. So it reduces oxidative stress. It improves immunity, so the immune system recognizes a cancer and kills it. And many of the new biological drugs work in that way now. And it also when a cancer has formed, taken hold, it prevents the proliferation, the growth of the cells, and how it spreads around the body. So, so they're found in all sorts of food, ranging from chocolate, tea, herbs, so anything that's basically looks nice and smells nice. And there's surprisingly a large amount in, say, coffee, chocolate. We only make those things unhealthy by adding sugar and all sorts of other things to them.
Can you please explain what oxidative stress is, and does a plant-based diet help with preventing oxidative stress?
So the term oxidative stress really it describes the balance between the number of nasty chemicals called free radicals, which are formed on one side, and the other side is how they're mopped up. So if we have too many free radicals compared to the antioxidants which mop them up, we have a situation of oxidative stress. So it means that more damage is done to the DNA. So the things which produce the free radicals is, number one, normal cell division. People forget that. We produce them every day. But carcinogens, having foods which promote chronic inflammation, being overweight, eating too much sugar, for example, even psychological stress can cause chronic inflammation. So on the one side, you've got these free radicals being formed. On the other side, things which reduce them would be your polyphenol-rich foods, exercise, and not having any deficiencies in your essential minerals and vitamins. So, and the thing about plants is they're full of minerals and vitamins, they're full of polyphenols, and they're not full of carcinogens. So, that's what you should be aiming for.
What kind of foods create chronic inflammation?
So chronic inflammation is a state, mainly in humans, where we think we're under attack from pathogens, but we're actually not. That's very separate to acute inflammation, which of course we need if we have a cold or an infection. Things which produce chronic inflammation are obesity, having too much processed sugar, which causes a high glycemic index and stress. Psychological stress actually has been linked to increased inflammatory markers. And things which reduce chronic inflammation would be your exercise, polyphenol-rich foods, the food in nature, which is got a nice smell, a taste, and a look to it, and having a healthy gut, actually. So that's making sure your gut health is good, because that improves your immunity. So immunity is able to recognize when it needs to increase inflammation or not.
What food types are anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory?
We often regard foods as sort of separate. We like to compartmentalize them into different things, but actually the foods which promote inflammation are often the same things which are promoting cancer, and the foods which protect you from inflammation and cancer are the same as well, because they're all intermingled in terms of mechanism. So the foods which promote cancer or inflammation would be your burnt meats, your processed carbohydrates, and processed meats, which have got lots of nitrates, which are converted into the inflammatory chemicals called nitrosamines. So that's on the bad side. And on the good side would be, effectively anything plant-based which is being grown well. So especially plants which have a strong taste. So, chili, herbs, turmeric, teas, even chocolate, coffee, those sort of very tasty foods. So they work by not only directly counterbalancing the anti-inflammatory effects, they also help to mop the free radicals which are produced by the carcinogens. And they also improve gut health, and they improve the immunity generally.
How do heterocyclic amines in meat become carcinogenic?
Heterocyclic amines are found in lots of foods, but when they're converted into the carcinogenic sort of metabolites, they're called, are largely produced by heating meat to high temperatures. If you're frying meat or grilling meat and you see charred black areas, those are particularly carcinogenic. And with the way the fats within the meat, if they're heated too high, they are also converted to a type of carcinogen. It's also red meats are much more vulnerable to being carcinogenic because they've got the heme iron, which gives it its red, from the hemoglobin. And that is actually required to convert nitrates, which are naturally present in meat, and particularly present in processed meats like hot dogs, spam, if people still eat that, or tinned meats, as a preservative. And the heme converts the nitrates into the carcinogens. So it's not only the type of meat, it's how it's cooked. On a separate question of whether it's just the meat being carcinogenic, what is really interesting, if you eat meat with lots of plant-based foods, in other words polyphenols, you can actually they form natural antidotes. So I'm not encouraging people to eat meat, you should eat much less, but if you do eat it, if you eat it with the natural antidotes, you get much less conversion into the carcinogens in your body. And those studies have been done, and they're quite genuine.
Many cancer patients have fully recovered by changing their lifestyle, including adopting a whole food plant-based diet. Could you comment on this?
Whether you should change your diet after cancer is, yes, it's very important. It will make you feel better. It'll help you cope with the cancer treatment, so you're more likely to get a full course. In other words, you're likely to get benefit from the treatments. There's lots of data out there that people who have eaten more polyphenol-rich foods, plant-based diets, and avoided carcinogens have a reduced chance of the cancer relapsing. So say, for example, some of the chemotherapies we've given in this unit has put something into complete remission. There's still a cloud over their head whether they're going to relapse 5-10 years later. So if you eat healthily, you're going to have a much less risk of your cancer returning. There are some people, of course, who have, say, metastatic cancer or cancer which we haven't got rid of through surgery or radiotherapy. And there is data to suggest that if you live a healthy lifestyle and convert into a largely plant-based polyphenol-rich diet with foods with low glycemic index, in other words, processed sugar, which is the three things which are most important, that you can definitely slow the rate of your cancer progression. And in some people, when they've got slow-growing cancer, that could mean, a cure. It could mean that the cancer is slow-growing, that you could live into your 90s healthily and not be affected by your cancer.
Based on the available evidence, what's the cost to our healthcare system and people's mortality from meat consumption?
So what's the cost of eating meat more than 3 times a week? Well, the World Cancer Research Fund and the WHO have put a figure to it. They believe that 10,000 deaths are caused a year by eating meat more than 3 times a week. Or in other words, if you got the whole population to eat meat less than 3 times a week, you would save 10,000 lives. The cost of treating those patients who have an increased risk of cancer is about £1.2 billion a year. So you'd make substantial savings to the NHS and obviously, more importantly, the quality of life of the patients who then get cancer and all the suffering in their families and relatives. What I do see when I see patients coming to me for the first time is virtually most people I see over 55 have a list of drugs which are all lifestyle related. So they'll be on statins, they'll be on blood pressure pills, they'll be on pills for diabetes, they might be taking a laxative. Most of these could be avoided through a healthy lifestyle. We know that though, diabetes, blood pressure, depression, we know that alone is £50 million a year out of an NHS budget. You factor on top of that cancers and heart disease, you're talking hundreds of millions, billions of pounds a year, which could be saved if people had the motivation to change their lifestyle.
Can you talk about radiotherapy and chemotherapy and their link to an increased risk of cancer?
Many of the treatments we give and the investigations involve ionizing radiation or chemotherapy, which, if you give it to young people, people with, say, cancer of the testes or breast in a young age or lymphomas, 10 years later you can have an increased risk of cancer. So you have to factor in the harm you're doing with these treatments against the benefit. course, fortunately, most people with these tumours in a young age have a good chance of cure. So, if there's a 0.5% increased risk of cancer, you would still give the chemotherapy knowing that there's a 90% cure rate. So, there is a risk. And we know, of course, from other data, such as the nuclear bomb data, that those patients have a higher risk of cancer as well.
How important is a whole food plant-based diet for preventing and recovery from chronic disease?
A plant-based diet has absolutely numerous benefits to health. I mean, in terms of cancer, we know that you will have a significant reduced risk of getting cancer in the first place. We know once you've got cancer, if you have a plant-based diet, you can slow the rate of progression of some tumours, and you can reduce your risk of relapse. It also will help to reduce many of the side effects of treatment. Osteoporosis, for example, is very common after breast and less so after prostate. People think, oh no, I need to eat meat to improve my bone. It's actually not true. The things which improve bone health are, proteins from plants, as well as having a healthy gut and eating polyphenols. And it's, very rarely talked about. Many patients go to the doctor and they, just give them calcium supplement. And the other benefits of diet are hardly ever mentioned. We know that the polyphenols within plants can have direct anti-cancer properties. We did a trial in this unit where we boosted patients' diet with a pill which had broccoli, green tea, turmeric and pomegranate, and it was just a way of boosting their intake of those very high polyphenol-rich foods. And it was a government-funded UK study, and we compared that against placebo, and we saw a 64% difference in the markers of prostate cancer within 6 months. And that wasn't, an alternative medicine study. That was a mainstream oncology studies, and we presented the data in the world's biggest cancer conference in Chicago. So, so we know if you do the science, you see good results. In fact, if you had a drug with that response rate, you'd be very happy. And, the nice thing about boosting the diet with either a supplement or dietary intervention measures, they also help other things. They reduce chronic inflammation, so your joints don't hurt as much. You feel more alert. You don't feel sluggish. Your gut health improves. So it's an all-win situation. Oncologists should be putting much more effort into looking at the diet and the global health of the patient, in addition to the drugs and radiation we use.
Could you tell us a little more about your study where you used plant-based nutrition as an anti-cancer intervention?
So the study we did here was basically boosting a patient's diet with polyphenols, and for the investigation we used a pill which had green tea, broccoli, pomegranate, and turmeric. So patients took it in the morning and lunchtime, and because it was a government study, it was well designed, and it was presented in mainstream oncology forums, and we're very pleased with the study, and it proved what we wanted to set out. But we're also very pleased that suddenly oncologists and geneticists from around the world were taking note of the importance of lifestyles to have an anti-cancer effect, but to support patients during cancer treatment. And now we're getting geneticists from around the UK recommending it to people who come to them with an increased susceptibility to cancer, because they often say, look, I've got a susceptibility to cancer, apart from removing my breasts or having my bowel removed, which is very dramatic. What can I do lifestyle wise? So one of the things you can do is first of all convert to a plant-based diet, or if you're finding that difficult, you can now take supplements which have been well designed and proven to be effective, to boost your polyphenol levels in your bloodstream. So it's nice that the whole oncology community is moving towards the importance of diet. A recent study, which is very exciting, was looking at the response rate of a new biological agent, which is very good for treating metastatic melanoma, a previously a fatal disease. And it was really exciting when they looked at the data, they saw a 30% increased response rate in people who had a healthy immunity through an improved gut health and polyphenol intake. So suddenly, as well as preventing cancer, you've got people with cancer responding better to the new biological agents, because the way the biological agents work is by getting a cancer cell and highlighting it to the immunity. So what's good? So we want patients to kill the cancer. We don't want to give them chemotherapy and radiotherapy. We want their own immunity to kill the cancer. So the best way to improve the immunity goes back to square one of living a healthy lifestyle. So suddenly lifestyle and diet is now in the mainstream of oncology treatments.
Can you talk about the benefits to the environment with reduced meat consumption?
Well, one interesting thing about being interested in lifestyle medicine is it's not just restricted to the benefits of patients. I mean, that's fantastic in itself, but it's also linked to the environment. We know that producing meat requires, I think the last estimate, that a third of the non-iced area of the planet is devoted to meat production. We know that it requires more land, it requires more water. So, there's large areas of India now, because it's becoming more prosperous, they're eating more meat, which have got, drastic chronic water shortages, largely produced by, having to fuel, cutting down forests and making grain for cattle and then feeding cattle. So it's a very inefficient way to feed humanity. Not only that, when humanity eats more meat, they get iller. Ill patients require, hospitals. They require drugs. They require a whole industry to try to make them better. Now, of course, if you reverse that trend and grew plants for human consumption, you'd use less land. There'd be less water shortages. There'd be less, fighting between indigenous tribes in South America, etc. We'd all be better off.
What can governments do to reverse the health epidemic we have and the planet emergency of climate change?
Well, we elect our MPs to try to change national policy, because it's very hard as us as individuals to walk around and persuade people to change. I mean, programs like this are great because it's putting the message out there. So they are trying. Fair play. It is difficult because every time an MP says, you should do this, you should do that, they're criticised for being paternalistic, but sometimes they have to make difficult decisions. So, and one of the things I'm surprised about is there's not much information out there about the risks of excess meat consumption. We know the data's there. We know the WHO and the World Cancer Research Fund are saying if you eat meat more than 3 days a week, you have a significant increased risk of cancer. So, we know the data's there. So why aren't there adverts on telly? Why aren't there billboards? In fact, this month I've been asked to lecture to the medical students in Cambridge about lifestyle. I mean, that's this month. This is the first time it's going into the medical students' curriculum about lifestyle and cancer. So it's been a bit slow, and I think it's there may be conspiracy theories. The food industry might be putting pressure. I don't know the reason, but it just seems there's not enough education out there to reduce your risk of cancer, rather than focusing all on about new drugs and new drug this.
If you had a rallying call to change, what would it be?
So in a nutshell, if you wanted to say to a population, how do you reduce your risk of cancer, how to improve your well-being, it's not about living longer, but it's about living better, without Alzheimer's, without your joint pains, which is going to get you in and out of hospital. Obviously smoking is number one. Obesity, caused by just overeating, that causes 40% of the cancers caused by lifestyle. If you can reduce meat to less than 3 days a week. I mean, come on, there are other things you can eat except meat, but always have it with the natural antidotes, which are your polyphenols, which we know from studies will reduce the impact of the negative parts of meat. Of course, that advice wouldn't help the environment, and we know that producing meat is cutting down rainforests, is creating water shortages. So, the bottom line is, try to have at least 4 days without any meat, or cut it out even further if you can.
What are the natural antidotes to cancer?
Okay. Well, we know from our own studies and studies from across the world that polyphenol-rich foods, which are the gifts from nature to mankind, they make food look nice, taste nice, and smell nice. So, we're not advising anything bad here. These act as natural antidotes to the carcinogens we also eat, which comes from heating meat and eating processed carbohydrates, etc. So, concentrate more on the antidotes to cancer, things which protect our health, and less on the things which cause harm, particularly meat.